Hello and welcome. My name is Cordell Green, Chairman of the UNESCO Information for All program, IFA, Working Group on Information Accessibility. Welcome to the Artificial Intelligence for Information Accessibility podcast, organized by Carnegie Council for Ethics in International Affairs. Your host is Ayushi Khemka, a Ph.D. student at the University of Alberta.
Hello and welcome back to the AI for Information Accessibility podcast. Today we have with us Emad Mousavi and Paolo Verdini to talk about AI and ethics. Both Emad and Paolo are PhD students at the Department of Philosophy, University of Alberta. They are working on a project together called the Ethics Bot, but more on that later. So why don't you both of us tell me more about what brought you into this exciting field of all things AI and specifically AI and ethics? Emad, why don't we start with you, and Paolo, we could follow with you.
Absolutely. So my background is in engineering. I've gotten both my bachelor's and master's in geomatics engineering. So I already had an exposure to the world of, I would say, in my master's, big data. That's when I got master's, that was the big buzzword at the time when I was doing my master's degree. And after I finished my master's degree, I then started working as an engineer. I actually still work as a geomatics engineer. So I had my fair share of exposure to the world of information technology, big data, and artificial intelligence. But so I always had this affinity towards the world of philosophy and moral psychology / moral philosophy, I should say. So that was basically my way into this field, that I had the background, the technical background of engineering, artificial intelligence, a bit, big data analysis and analytics in general. And then I've always had this huge interest in the world of philosophy. And I found that, basically AI and ethics are a very happy medium of basically both worlds. So I started getting more interested into the field, started reading more, listening to what we're doing, more podcasts in the same area. And little by little, I got more interested, and I thought that I could actually thrive in this environment and actually contribute to the whole discussion into the field. So that's why I thought about it more seriously to take it up as actually a degree. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing currently, which is working in the field of ethics and AI. So that's a short answer. I'm more than happy to expand more if you have any questions on the details. But yeah, this is the big picture.
Yeah, that I would say that I wish I had more kind of lofty plans attached to my interest, how it started at least. It all got started by chance, basically. After my BA and master in philosophy, I had a spare year before anything that was supposed to happen as a PhD, and hopefully a PhD student by then. And then I applied, enrolled in a computer science program, and as a master degree in big data analytics and social mining over back in Italy. So I guess that started like that. My interest started to bloom up to that point. I came from a little bit of math and logic background, so it seemed to me like a very natural continuation of what I was doing, a little more an application actually. It was very, very abstract and theoretical what I was doing. So that got me into the topic of AI. By putting my hands on things and just having to work with projects. Then again, I basically compiled my interest in that was building up in the AI with the with my philosophy background and what I was about to do from then on. And well, one of the things in philosophy that actually makes it relevant is to be very aware of contemporary issues and times, and it's undeniable how ubiquitous AI is in our everyday life, and so it seemed to be very relevant, more than interesting, if not interesting, just to start working on what exactly are the interrelation between AI systems and then, let's say, digitalize humanities in general, or with our daily lives. And yeah, and so little by little I started getting into projects and more projects and getting to more involved in all of that.
It's so interesting to know that both of your journeys, academic journeys thus far, have been very intersectional and interdisciplinary and very similar to each other's, if not the same. So my next question to you is that I know that both of you are working on the Ethics Bot project. Could you just tell us a bit more about that and what is it all about?
Do you want to take it, Paolo?
Yeah, I can start, no problem. So yeah, but since we're talking about the big field of AI, we're just talking about specifically when it comes to the Ethics Bot project, it comes to kind of a subfield of AI, which is natural language processing. So we're working on a model, a language model generator, a natural language generator. So we wanted to devise one of these models so that it could actually make or respond to salient ethical questions from the perspective, so to speak, of a machine, well, in the forms of course, of a language model. So natural language processing has been a field that has been really flourishing in the next few years, and among all the fields in AI, it has received probably more funding than any other subfield, and has developed incredibly fast, to the point that actually we had to change our model and our approach to our project halfway through, because we started working with one model, OpenAI's GPT-2, and now we decided to switch before finalizing the project to GPT-3, which is the ultimate version of the same model. So the idea was actually to train this model to have with ethic-based textbooks about the ethics of AI and other documentation, and have it answer specific questions that you would actually ask to an AI expert or somebody who actually has knowledge about the field, and see exactly how the AI responds to those questions. So that's, I guess, the gist out of it. And Emad, if you want to say something.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, there are a few points that I need to clarify about this project. So I'm not going to repeat what Paolo just perfectly laid out about how the project started and what we're trying to do. But I want to put emphasis on what we're not trying to do on this project. So usually the natural language generators, there are many of them out there in the internet, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to mimic the human responses as best as possible. In other words, what they're trying to do is to basically see if they can fool their audience and not knowing whether there's actually a person behind the computer, or if there's a bot or a software or an AI basically behind the computer generating the sentences. So we are very upfront that we're not doing that. Actually, we are not interested in concealing that the responses that are being generated are actually by an AI. We want our audience to know that these answers are generated by an AI, because the point we're trying to follow up on is we're trying to determine if answers provided by an AI can provoke a reflection and thoughts, or ethical reflection or ethical thoughts for that matter. So this is the goal of the ethics bot in short. So what we're trying to do, as Paolo was describing, is we are using the latest, greatest technology and model. That's what Paolo is doing mostly in the project. And the ethics bot is generating some answers for us based on the queries that we're providing to the ethics bot. And then what we're doing is we're giving these answers, these queries, these responses to the queries that we're making to the ethics bot to a panel of experts, including ourselves, Paolo, myself, Jeffrey, Dr. Rockwell, who's our supervisor, and a bunch of other philosophers and instructors in the University of Alberta mainly. And then we're asking them to evaluate the responses that the ethics bot is providing as if the responses are coming from, let's say, an undergrad student in philosophy or psychology. And the goal is to see if the ethics bot can provide good enough answers to provoke reflection, ethical reflection, and ethical thought. So that is our end goal as we have defined for ourselves, basically. And Paolo actually is also engaged in initial stages of another project to take the ethics bot and actually insert it into a classroom situation, which if you want to, you can talk more on it, but that's also a very exciting, basically, application of the ethics bot that, that I think is very interesting.
Yeah, the ramifications are the project is the one that Emad was just mentioning is in its initial form. So we need to find out the detail, but that's exactly what we are aiming to do: introduce some of the generations from the language into actually a classroom environment, and just to have a form of experimental / augmented philosophy class and see how that works. Of course, that it's very important that we understand how to deliver it properly and not just completely haphazardly and just see how it works, because that would be it would define any sort of purpose. We don't want to do that. But yes, the important thing is that once the ethics bot is refined, and as it reaches a state that we are pleased with and actually functions properly, the ramifications are many and are possible. It could be turned into a chatbot, meaning that it can impersonate different philosophers. So it could be actually interactive. It could be fun. It could be informative to the point that actually it can summarize and it can replicate very well textbook that the ethics bots read. It can provoke critical thought and spark interesting discussion. It can, of course, it can be the focus could be on itself, meaning how does the ethics bot work and what is our relationship to our ethics bot? How do we interface with an AI having human-like thoughts, even if, again, this is not a Turing test. We are not interested in that, as Emad has just said. So the applications are many, and yes, we are very looking forward to applying into different settings.
I want to extend this conversation on ethics, and I'm wondering, there are a lot of times wherein a lot of like AI or ML related projects, they treat ethics as like an ethics sort of like come as an afterthought, like when everything that could have gone wrong has gone wrong, be it racially, be it as per gender or sexuality, or like different categories, and everything has gone wrong, and then ethics come into the picture because people realize that, oh, we just forgot to talk about that. How do you both think of ethics in AI as like a larger field? Emad, why don't we start with you?
Absolutely. Well, this is the answer to this question can be a very, very long answer. I mean, I can go on and on for a long time answering this question, but I'll try my best to answer it as briefly as possible. And yeah, Paolo, feel free to jump in wherever you think you can.
Sure,
you want to jump in and correct me or add anything or whatnot. So of course, studying in this field, being a student of philosophy and ethics and working on ethics and AI, I absolutely think that it's imperative to think about ethics before we start any projects, let alone a project as a project that can have as many consequences as, say, for example, AI can have with the potential that it has. So the short answer is, yeah, absolutely. I think it should not be an afterthought. I agree that it is an afterthought right now, that we start a project and when we see that things are going wrong, then we pause and say, oh, things are going wrong. Why don't we start talking about the ethics of it or the do's and don'ts of it? So that part is, I absolutely agree with the premise of your question, that it is an afterthought and it shouldn't be an afterthought. To expand it a bit more is how I think about it, and this is my personal view of it. So when I look, well, AI is a loaded word, right? AI can mean many things to different people. If you ask me, I bet if you ask me to define AI and Paolo here, we will give you different answers. They may be slightly different answers, but they're going to be different. And that is just the nature of AI, plain and simple. If you bring in two, AI professors and ask them, I've actually done this, and ask them what do they think AI is, they're going to give you slightly different answers. And this trickles down into everybody else who works in the industry and who has little exposure to a lot of exposure to the world of AI. So having said that, when I look at the AI and ethics in AI, there are three different levels of it to me. There is a level which your listeners may be familiar with. For example, Nick Bostrom is a philosopher behind one level of it, which is the level of existential threat of AI. Super intelligent machines, a future which is filled with AI robots, and they're basically our overlords controlling everything. So that is one view of it. The second view of it is when we're going to get to a general artificial intelligence where we're going to have AI who are as intelligent as human beings. So that's and I want to be clear that we are not in that realm whatsoever. We're not, at least in my opinion, we're not even close to that level. So that's the second basically tier of looking at AI. And the third one, which we are currently in, is we have a lot of intelligent machines which are doing intelligent work and definitely need to be regulated in the sense that people who are designing it, developers who are designing it, people who are in charge of putting in, understanding the mechanisms in which these softwares are being developed should have a good understanding of what the softwares or what the systems or what the bots or what the code that they're developing is doing and what the potential of that piece of, let's say, code, software, bot, platform, whatever designing it is, and what is intended for. So these are the three main questions that I think those who are in charge should ask themselves and each other in the field. So that's how I look at the whole thing.
Yeah, that's covers a lot of ground, and both your question and Emad answer actually. So I would try to not overlap. At the same time, I try to. The risk is me going into a complete rant that is completely digress completely. So I just try to keep myself steady and on point as much as I can. So one thing that I would like to say is that, yes, as much as I agree with the premise that you said in the question, actually, how Emad answers to that, I have to say that to me, the problem is the problem of the status of the technique in our contemporary society, just nowadays. So AI just being like an aspect, probably the probably the most relevant out of it, of complete modernization of a certain type of rational thought. And so the point of the afterthought seems to be very well built in what we are doing with the understanding and the conceptual construction that is behind our delegations to machines, for example. So this means that, just to quote, am I allowed to quote Kant in this context? But maybe I can. So you see, Kant, when speaking about the moral imperative, used to say, and it's a very strange quote that people get a little bit mixed up about, because it says, if you must do something, then you can. Which said, is not the other way around. And well, let me get to that. So that actually allows for, explains what is the freedom between actually the moral imperative. So there is a very steep difference between what you morally must do and then what you can actually practically transform into your reactions, into your transformative actions. I believe that the technical work and the science, as understood as mostly as technique these days, works exactly the opposite. So if you can, then you must. So whatever path we are undertaking in research and development, we follow it, and by we intend as a researcher group of people, or as a modernized society as a whole. We follow it just because there are the possibilities to do that, because we want to extend even the combinatory possibilities of whatever can be researched. And that comes always before the question, is it possible, is it ethical, or what are the conditions that we should actually agree on before we undertake this project, any project for that matter, be it AI research, be in genetical manipulation, and so forth. So when after that we realize that we've gone too far, that comes again, we start trying to contain some sort of a problem. But the necessity of the afterthought is just built in the way we actually approach problems nowadays. Let's say philosophically, I'm very much of a pessimist. So, but from an AI perspective, I would say that I'm still a little bit neutral, if not skeptical in general. So I'm not saying that again, there's going to be a Skynet as in the Terminator universe that is going to pull the strings for us and all sort of that. I mean, I kind of believe a version of it, but it's much more humanized and not in the sense that it's portrayed in the movies. But at the same time, yes, I do think that there is space and there is need of intervention. And first of all, addressing the problems that are there. Could it be one for all? I'm just gonna say one, but it's not the only one, nor probably even the more important, the transparency. Transparency meaning how actually the AI models are built. Of course, these are proprietary model, most of them, so it's not clear exactly what data has been gathered to build this model. And so we use things that are actually the work literally as black boxes. And neural networks and multi-layered neural networks are, especially for whoever has not designed them, they are really literally black boxes. So you can only evaluate what they do and their performance and actually their critical status after they have been put to use. So there is an aspect that actually, again, is embedded in how we are dealing with this sort of technical items. And at the same time, regulations should become a mainstream concept and a mainstream discussion. And I would like to extend not only limited to the field of AI, but also other fields that are technical and production related, and especially when we are actually funding so much and when they have such a large extent impact on everybody's life.
With this regulation, but I'm wondering, because there's been a lot of conversation around how AI can sort of like replace human intelligence, or like just like be as intelligent as a human. And like we were initially talking about how there are people who are creating AI wherein you're trying to fool the audience and they will not be able to, and testing whether they are going to be able to figure out if it's an AI or a human who's talking to them. Do you think AI can achieve that sort of a base standard? And is that a world that we need to be prepared for? Is that an important intervention that humanity needs to make right now?
There's this textbook, or should I say handbook, that is handed out to philosophy students that requires us to answer a question by a question. They teach this at university. I'm joking. So I'm saying this to actually answer the question by another question. It's very important how we define intelligence. I think the key to answering a question is, what do we mean by intelligence? And let me expand on this a little bit. Paolo quoted Kant. Let me quote Chomsky. At a similar event, I'm quoting him not verbatim, but he was asked, can machines think? Basically the same question that was posed to Turing and is being asked, since 7 years ago when first Turing wrote his paper, Can Machines Think? And he answered with something along these lines, basically, that it depends on what you mean by thinking. For example, if I'm not mistaken, in Hebrew, birds and airplanes don't fly, they glide, if you want to translate that. So depending on what you mean by thinking, a machine can think or not think. A bird can fly or glide, depending on what you mean by the question. Now, I made that example to point out that it's important for us to know what we mean by intelligence. When we say, can machines actually replace or get to the level of human intelligence, what do we mean by intelligence? If we mean, for example, processing information in general, so that's basically a baseline of our intelligence, right? We as human beings, we have some sensors on our body, our eyes, our brain, gets the information, we hear information, we process it, in our brains, and then we act or react or make decisions. If that is a definition of, intelligence, sure, I mean, machines can do that. But for example, if by intelligence, if we include something like contemplating, something like imagining in intelligence, can machines ever do that? I don't know. I would say with the current state of AI, the answer I would say is no, they won't be able to do that, just because of the nature of imagining. It's a subjective, basically, endeavor. No one can come and design an experiment to empirically and objectively measure whether I'm imagining something or not. I should report whether I'm imagining something or not, just because of the definition of it. I would say, I would argue that we can never know if a machine is imagining something. So in that sense, if that is included in our definition of intelligence, then my answer would be no. AI would never be able to gain the same level of intelligence as human beings. So the point I'm trying to make here is, depending on what we mean by intelligence, the answer may vary, but what we know for a fact, what we know without a doubt, is AI has actually has a lot of potential to do very interesting and high-level processing tasks that were unimaginable for human beings even 20 years ago. But what it lacks currently, just as a last thought, is, and this is obviously, I'm not breaking any news or ground here, this is a known issue of AI, that when it wants to cross from one domain to another, AI still lacks that ability. And unless we, as AI researchers and developers, can increase the capability and functionality of the AI to do that, we're still we still need to do a lot of work to get to a general intelligence question, that whether AI can reach to a general intelligence of what humans and what we have at the moment. And if I want to just quickly clarify what I mean by the cross field comment that I made is, for example, we have, if I'm not mistaken, is the current AIs that we have can beat any chess masters that we currently have, human chess masters, like the champion of chess right now is an AI, or the game of Go is an AI, the champion of the game Go. But can you have a conversation with the AI who's behind the Go AI? Can you have a conversation, a meaningful conversation? Can you ask, for example, the AI who's responsible for the game of Go to, set an appointment for you with your doctor, and at the same time, if process natural language at the same time, and do another task, which is in another domain of intelligence that human beings can easily navigate and do. So we still don't have that capability in AI world. So yeah, to basically summarize my answer, in a narrow sense, if you want to narrow our intelligence to subfields, absolutely, AI is already there and beyond. But in a general sense, we're still not there, and we have a lot of ways to go to get there.
Paolo, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so my thoughts on that is that it's a very passionate type, passionate, enticing type of question, because has taken many people from different fields to just chime in and just try to find the proper answer to it, or just pour their thoughts. And I found it interesting that it's been widely seen, and people have searched for the thing or the entity, the element that would just differentiate humans from machine. So in a more like I don't know, popular or vulgar way, or let's say not informed way, to people who just say, well, machine can't feel. Like a lot of pop culture has started like that, no, as the main difference. The feeling at the passion of the machine. How does it get their feelings? One that would be just one thing. Another thing that has been in more like philosophically grounded discourse, it could have been, well, machines lack intentionality, or they work on manipulation of syntax, as opposed to they lack the semantic aspect, the semantic atmosphere of Wittgenstein would say around it. So it's interesting how, again, over and over, people have tried to point the finger at something specific that differentiate the machines, and there's an ongoing conversation, especially because the machines acquire power, and not only now in terms of computational power, but power is a presence in our society. So it is a very important question. So there are certainly two sides of the question you asked. So that is AI going to replace humans? So work-wise, there is definitely some jobs that are going to be done by machines instead of humans. Now it's already been there, but in the future, even more so, because of efficiency, because how easy it is to make some of our job process automatic. So machines can be more efficient, can be more precise, and can be trained to exactly do what we usually do in a more specific and less consuming way, and so forth. So of course, some jobs are going to get more in jeopardy than other jobs, and that's part of the question. That's the state of things right now. In terms of a more general and more are machines going to replace humans as their role in the history and development? Well, we need to, I think, what I completely agree with whatever Emad has said so far. I would add something instead of just, for example, repeating that the danger here is that we are making ourselves more similar to the AI and not vice versa. This is what is actually happening in terms of, we reason nowadays much along the lines of efficiency of output. Everything has this very much input-output metaphor attached to it, or in general, vantage or growth. These are all, well, somebody would say, now I wouldn't mention the name because it's a little bit of dark horse, but I would say Heidegger, in just whispering, has warned us, even though again his analysis of technique was not really anything but as a warning, but just more like an observation, a description of things. So we need to be very careful about how do we think that our product is going to judge us and not vice versa. I think this should be something that we have to keep in mind. And this is also something that I think differentiates our way of interacting with each other in our place in the world as opposed to AI. So the AI systems, they by themselves, by design, they don't have a project. They're not within a developed a community of development as we humans are. We are taking AI into our life project to make it better, easier, even more efficient. It's not a bad word. Efficient is not a bad word. So it can actually be there. Cleaner, can help us solve a problem. But that's the main important thing to keep in mind. We have to resist the risk of just try to relate with what we have created and become more AI-like and not vice versa. I think this is very important. Reading back from Aristotle, for example, in the Nicomachean Ethics, there is the first, as far as I know, the first theoretical the distinction between knowledge and wisdom. So knowledge is something that actually is object-like, is necessary, and as far as well, leave aside the theoretical or contemplation side that Emad was talking, but as much as deductive knowledge, we can go as far as that. Well, sure, machines are there, and it's perfectly fine. The wisdom is just the ability of use rationality to further the human good, and that is something that is inherently human. So because it is within our project and it is a part of the history of our development, so we are actually welcoming AI into our general global system, and that's something that we should always be very cautious about, and not leave this flagship and try to revert the roles, because that's a very slippery slope, and we should really we are our worst enemies in this sense. We should just keep our heads on our shoulders and just treat AI for what it is, and of course there are problems, and they're all we discussed before, and the discussion is open to further dialogue, but this is what I wanted to say about this point.
Okay, now that we have quoted Kant, Chomsky, Heidegger, and whatnot, my final question is about grad school stuff. So, do you think, as grad students working on AI and related fields, there are ways in which universities specifically can help push forward the discourse on and ethical and equitable AI. And I think related to that, or maybe prior to that, would be a larger question that is an equitable and accountable AI even possible? Does that exist? Can that exist?
Yeah, well, to answer your last question first, I would say that it absolutely is possible. And I understand that there's a certain school of thought out there that thinks that it's not possible, but I would submit that that is because of the just lack of imagination. I mean, this ties to the first part of your question, that what can schools, universities do when promoting equitable AI. I think AI is here. Artificial intelligence is here, whether we like it or not. And as Paolo was mentioning just now, being efficient is not bad. It's actually a good thing. And this is one thing that actually AI is designed for, to be more efficient, to do tasks, to do jobs more efficiently. And this brings with it a lot of baggage, in the sense that, okay, it's going to replace a lot of jobs. And that's where we should be more, I would say, creative with our solutions to the problem. For example, I'm just going to put it out there, something like universal basic income. I understand that there are politicians in the US who are advocating this. This is not, I'm not talking policy or politics here, but this is a real thing, that AI is going to replace some jobs. And for AI to be equitable, we need to come up with ways in which AI can benefit everyone, can benefit the society, because the reality of the present, I'm not going to even say the future, is that AI is already here. It's taking up a lot of jobs, a lot of tasks that were used to be done by ordinary people. And we can absolutely design a better AI system. We can absolutely think about the ethics of AI. In response to your two questions before this question, that usually ethics is an afterthought. This is actually one of the domains and fields that we as researchers in this field should be more aware and should be more sensitive about. For example, well, Paolo and I, we're not specifically working on this subfield that I'm talking about, but there are absolutely people in the field of AI and ethics who are working on the subfield and should be more cognizant of the ramifications of an AI system, that the effects of an AI system on the society as a whole, and should come up with creative ways and solutions to make AI more equitable for everyone. So yeah, I absolutely think that it is possible. There are good proposals out there, but we definitely need to discuss more on the ways in which we can improve on those, on ways on which we can expand on some of the ideas. And what universities can do is basically wake up to the reality, to the present, not even, again, I'm very deliberate in choosing this word, that it's not a future problem. It's here, and we have to start dealing with it right now. To start waking up to the fact that, okay, AI is here, and we're currently doing a lot of tasks using this technology, and there is no stopping it. There is no turn off switch that you can say, okay, I don't like this technology, let's not do this anymore. I mean, you can do it in a very local sense. A university can decide not to work on it, but that does not mean that the other universities, the other cities, the other countries are going to do that. So AI is here to stay, and it's just going to get bigger and hopefully better. We as researchers, as university, as administrators of university, as people who are in charge of making decisions, we need to start thinking about this more seriously and more deliberately. So yeah, basically that is my view on the question.
Yeah, on my part, I think quite a lot has been done recently. We have to understand that development in AI, the quickness and how fast it goes, it probably outruns the capacity for university programs to keep up with the pace, or even, well, if not necessarily programs, the structure within the university itself, meaning that some adjustment of adjustment time is to be taken into consideration here. But I think that there is a good deal of discussion going on nowadays in universities, and a good deal of attention to representation and problems of representation, and how, again, as I said before, data collection, transparency, and policies that discuss about privacy regulation, surveillance, because, you know, often we might think about AI, the first picture that we get to AI is just the robot-like person that simulates the appearance and the demeanors of a human. But in terms of what Emad was saying, is in terms of if intelligence is intended as capacity of calculation, let's not forget that rationality comes from ratio, which in Latin means actually calculus. So then a simple operator or just something that a tool that just makes 2 + 2 = 4, that's an AI almost system in itself. A non-developed AI system on itself, but nonetheless. So we need to intervene into discussion, but that's already happening, and we need to allow some time for university campus and people just to know exactly how to tackle the questions, which I think it has been done in, at least in certain universities, quite well. The discussion is very much open. So this is the first part of the question that you asked. Well, the second part of the question, again, I'll go a little bit on a rant, and it goes like, is an equitable and accountable AI possible? And I would like to do a very philosophical thing, like diverge the question on something that I can answer, and and probably say that one of the many things that AI, at least the curator or the policymaker there, hopefully we will see more and more in huge corporation, because let's not forget that that's where everything mostly it's going to. So besides that, one thing that we start asking, that they're doing a good job on addressing problem of representations and minorities and how exactly AI systems are working. But if you take that aside for a second, let's not forget that the automatic approach to problem solving should actually, the ultimate goal would just to free us from the toil and trouble of work and workload, should make our life easier. Or we should just, if I have to allow to again hint to Marcuse, for example, reducing the stress of our work should just help us flourish as a species in a way that we have more time for ourselves, more time for leisure time, more time, but not leisure time means just you know, sitting on the couch, but just do meaningful things for each other. So that should be the ultimate goal of an AI, just to free us from the toil of and the trouble of just having heavy work. So that brings another question, because if exactly some AI research or AI policy research are they're doing a good job on checking that representation is in order, that there's no discrimination in order. At the same time, one big question is how the distribution of wealth is impacted in the installation of even more powerful AI systems. We're not heading towards a more fair society. Absolutely not at all. So I think this is a kind of a main problem that is even more important. I don't know if the problems should have like a scale, but in any case, this is a very, very important, because whoever deploys and employs AI systems is very likely to have the power to centralize huge quantities of wealth. So how is this wealth going to be redistributed? How is this going to positively affect society? Let us forget for a second something that is very, 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 very understated, which is the environmental impact of AI. So running what we do in the ethics book project, like GPT-3, is extremely taxing from an environmental point of view. Not exactly what we specifically, Emad and I, are doing, but training a large model like that, you can actually see how the CO2 production for training a model like that is off the charts. It's like 300,000 times larger than a single individual CO2 production in a year. This has been proven by a study. And actually, there's a little bit code that hangs around the web that can be attached to your code to see exactly when you're training your model, how impactful it is, what you're doing. So there's a lot of problem going on AI. So AI is not just about efficiency. It's not just about making things easier, but in itself, it has an impact, a negative impact on our environment and so sustainability is a problem. Representation is another problem, and how AI is designed is another problem itself. If I can touch for a second, for example, on the problem of representation, I think we have a theoretical problem there, because most of the AI system, they work, and I'm talking more about prediction systems, statistical systems, or even natural language processing, which concerns us more closely. These are based on the data gathering, so they rely on a background in order to predict the future. They learn from what it's been to predict the future. Of course, we have seen that using this system might very well lead to discrimination. So how do we change that? Well, either we put a human filter that intervenes after, and we go back to the afterthought, or we need to change the way in which AI is working right now, which again, gathering large amounts of data and learn it by itself. This is a very much of a problem. The theoretical problem is that we want to have a bias-free AI to be more equitable, but at the same time, we want it to maintain the core humanity level of bias. But bias is something that is inherently human. So, and not because the fact that we have a prejudgment of groups of people, or even ourselves for that matter, but because we are not obliterating our background, our history. So we come from a place and we are going forward to another place. So we make decisions based on that. To have an AI that completely cancels that and just works in a different way, well, it's something that I'm not sure how we are prepared to design or even think about something that is so alien to the way that we understand problems.
I think that gives important questions for our listeners to think about, and for us also. And that brings us to the end of our episode. And thank you so much, Emad. Thank you so much, Paolo, for joining us. It was wonderful talking to both of you.
Thank you.
And I hope you had a good time.
Yep.
Thank you, Ayushi. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for having us.
The AI4IA Conference and podcast series is being hosted in collaboration with AI for Society, Kule Institute for Advanced Studies at the University of Alberta, Center for New Economic Diplomacy at ORF India, and the Broadcasting Commission of Jamaica.